speaking on dreams. And thank you coming out on this night when it's raining and cold and the wind is blowing, and we just as soon hide behind a stove and have our cat or dog in our lap. or fine hard rock, yes. So I'd also like to thank Avenues to Wellness for organizing this program and putting in a lot of work into it. Nanda and Suzanne and Doreen, thank you so much for bringing this gift to the community. Tonight we speak about dreams, and dreams is, as far as I'm concerned, the royal road to wellness, as the Via Regia, Freud was saying, dreams are the Via Regia to the unconscious, but for us, it's to wellness. And why is that? Dreams can address so many aspects of our lives. And I'd just like to share a dream I had last night, and maybe you can think about it and tell me what it possibly could indicate. I'm an Amish man. I have 10 children. I'm in my Amish garb. I have a felt hat because it's winter. I'm in a dark suit, and I'm thinking I'm founding a bank, which is nothing what the Amish would think about. And I think, I can do that, and I can read the instructions, and I go step by step about the instructions. And I encourage my children, I had 10 kids, to deposit money into the accounts. I'm faced with the federal banks and the insurances, and I think, I can't do that. And I become totally burdened, and I think, maybe not. Scene switches. I'm in the house of my parents, and my sisters are there, and one of them has a punk black hairdo, like wild, which they never would do. And we are starting to a rough house, and we are getting into a pillow fight, and before we know, we're in this total hilarity. So where does a dream like that come from? What do you think? Yes, Robin.
Possibilities that you haven't actually read, I would say. Yeah.
Definitely the bankers.
And the Amish, and having 10 kids, and yeah, a lot of experiences we don't get to experience everything in this life, so the dream kind of expands our levels of experience.
Very true. It gives us different choices. Great. What else? What else do you think?
Could be from past lives.
Yeah, but it happened to be that I lived with Amish people.
Oh, really?
And I was totally fascinated by their dream life, because at times it would just become a family event. The 3-year-old child wakes up in the middle of the night, starts crying and says, I'm dreaming of this bear and it's chasing me. And the whole family starts, being kind to the child and so on, comforting the anxiety and so on. So it became actually a family event, which is unusual. Well, yes.
Well, if it was my dream,
Yes.
and I think about the family event, the pillow fight, sounds like a family event a little bit, and probably one that, with the punk hairdo and all, maybe you didn't do.
Yes, definitely.
So it reminds me of what Robin said too.
Just as you were saying, you prefaced the interpretation of the dream with, if it were my dream. And that's a very It's a fine etiquette to do it like that. Because when we say, this dream means you were having anxiety, it's getting to be projective. And it's much easier to hear from the dreamer who's sharing the dream, you know, if it were my dream, then you can accept or not accept or, you know, weigh the situation rather than being finger pointed. So that's one of the etiquette when you interpret dreams for others. In one form, I mean, there are many ways of working with dreams, but that's one of them. Yes?
If it were my dream, I would almost think about the Amish part of trying to look at, and I think this happens, is looking at an alternative from what we're perceiving the reality is. It's like you're trying to figure out a way to reestablish something in a global sense. Sometimes dreams have a global interpretation that you're working out in your subconscious too. So I would tend to look at that part as facing a inspirational project and then thinking, oh, maybe that's not going to work. But you know, just working it out.
Well, of course, I'm sweating out this program here. So if it were my dream, it was something like, I'm trying to be very serious. I'm trying to work this out with money or, you know, in a societal setting, and it becomes just like a burden. So shift the scene to a pillow fight. Why don't we all have a good time with it? So but you can really, you know, dreams have so many facets that, you know, like we don't have this globe with the mirrors around it. What is that name of that?
Disco ball.
Disco ball, yeah. So, you know, I would compare dreams with a disco ball. There's every facet of this ball has a meaning or has some message or some experience, and our mind wants to latch on, what does it mean? Which is only one aspect of it. There are different aspects of just experiencing a dream. Having the experience of the dream itself is what it is. So we can't say, okay, we are having a lunch, and what is the meaning of the lunch? Well, it's an experience. So not to get too attached to when we have a dream to what is the meaning. That's one aspect. But also to think, well, what kind of experience is that? Or what emotions are there? Or, symbolism, and the symbolism gets kind of tricky at times. So a symbol, you can never quite pin it down. A symbol, that's what it is. You know, that has many aspects. There's a certain kind of a mystery about it, and that's the challenge of dreams. Why could this be that dreams are the so-called royal road to wellness? Why could that be? And maybe you have some answers to that. Yes, please.
Well, isn't wellness often described as a happy brain? And if you dream effectively, you can work out any issues you have. I was in a coma once for 6 months, and I dreamt continuously.
You did?
Continuously, the whole time. Nobody knew but me. And the monitors.
Fabulous. And do you remember some of them?
Yeah, all of them. I'm writing them.
Fabulous. What a total gift. What do you think? Early.
There's an aspect too that it seems as if sometimes our subconscious, for me, picks up information during the day that I didn't pay attention to, and it kind of feeds it back to me. And one class, I don't think I took it with you, but somebody is that if you dream about there being a broken rung on the ladder, first thing you do is go out and check the ladder, because it very well may have been something that you saw and it didn't register at the time, but your brain is kind of feeding it back to you.
So just being literal in the first place.
Absolutely, in the first place.
A little schematic here. Our day consciousness has certain parameters, and mostly directed by our ego or by our mind, and there's a certain parameter to that, and let's just say it's this: day consciousness. Other consciousness, when we move into a meditative consciousness, into mindfulness, that has a larger parameter. We notice more aspects about our life. So we notice maybe more sounds that are around, the heater, we notice our body sensation, what is going on in our body, what emotions are present, which we might or might not do when we are interacting with somebody. And so I would say there in the meditative place, and there are different levels of meditations that allow us to be present to a larger self of ours. Then there is our night consciousness or our dream consciousness, which I think is the most sensitive there is. But it's also the most enigmatic. How do you translate all of that? And some of it is so bizarre, and some of it is so frightening, and or ridiculous, or brings our shadow right to us, or brings people from the contact people from the other side. So a lot of it is kind of uncomfortable, and our day consciousness has opinions. So to just keep this in mind, that the motivation of the night consciousness comes from a different level of our being. You could say the collective unconscious, which is what Carl Jung discovered and worked with. So the collective unconscious is really the unconsciousness of all of us and the planet, and at a deeper level. So we can connect with that. Some people say our dreams, our nightlife is directed or motivated from the soul. Now the soul has many connotations, kind of religious connotations, but let's just say there is an aspect of ourselves that is larger, and it's kind of mystical, and it's hard to grasp. But that larger part of ourselves motivates the dreams, and of course many other things in our lives, and is there to remind us to become larger, to grow, to be on the avenue of wellness, to correct, to may have course correction for our life when we are stuck. It might be remind us to be have a healthier lifestyle, or when we are in a crisis, an illness. Well, what do we need to know? that is so baffling when we have some kind of an illness that we don't even quite know where it comes from and what it is, and our bodies are not particularly well equipped to just say, okay, it's in the liver and we need to do something there. No, our body is not that attuned. So dreams can give you a hint or be directional. And it takes a while to understand this language. And it's not like you need to do something overnight. You can't learn this overnight, but you can pay attention. And after a while, you get it. We all have to learn various languages of our life, like what are the messages from our body? So let's say we have a headache. What does that mean? Did we listen to too much music? Did we, were we on the street and have and were breathing too much fuel or whatever? It's we have to learn. What is that sensation? Or something is happening in our chest. Oh, okay. So what does that mean possibly? So we have to learn the language of the body. And that's, very well done through meditation or just mindfulness. Mindfulness meaning directing our attention inside. This is, the dreams, can present us with ways of resolving when we are in a crisis mode, when we have to make major decisions, when we are faced with perhaps a new partner. Is this the right one? What kind of messages do I get at night? And we have to learn how to negotiate that. Because the tendency is to interpret the dreams in the beginning too literal, like, what is the rug missing? In the ladder? Well, we better check. Yes, that's the first step. But we also need to learn how to perhaps use a zoom lens. That is a zoom lens where we go just to the literal, very specific, to something much wider. And we might just want to get into some of that. However, I want to hear a little bit from you. What brings you here, and what would you like to know or learn about? And maybe a little bit about your own dream experience or dream life. So that, and April, you are right next to me.
Well, Wolfgang actually asked me to come here and just share some of my thoughts about dreaming. I'm a member of Eckankar, and we understand that we are soul. This would correlate with what you said. We're soul, and we have a body. We don't have a soul. We are soul, and we have a body. So when our body sleeps in the nighttime, or if we're napping, soul doesn't sleep ever. So soul, while the body is sleeping, soul can be experiencing life on the inner, higher planes. And so that would explain why you were in a coma. That was your body that was in the coma.
Yeah.
But soul is awake 24/7. So sometimes our dreams could be recall of real experiences that you're having on the inner planes for your benefit. And there's just also what Jolene mentioned, dreams could be a past life recall, especially kind of some of the scary ones.
Or I call them sometimes a costume, like Amish costume.
Oh, I see.
That could be costume
Or it has a symbol
dreams.
for you,
Yes.
For sure. So sometimes, why would you? And as you said, the more you have them, the more you can kind of distinguish what would be a past life dream, or you can ask your higher self, is this a past life? And so sometimes if you're working on something, like you have an odd negative attitude toward either someone or some experience, you hate the ocean or, those things, and you ask your higher self, perhaps get a dream, and it would show you a past life experience of something that happened that, you drowned or you were, that sort of thing. So that can be helpful.
So let me interject here just for a moment. So what you are talking about is having a dream intention. So you're having, you're talking about the ocean, you're having some difficulties with the large ocean, and you would like to know.
Yeah.
And so that is setting an intention about your dream life, which is very important to know and to practice. Our dreams generally, kind of real whatever we kind of need, or, it's sort of like, it's sort of generic. What do you need to work on? And maybe there's something very specific, but if we are, let's say, if we need to know something or need to get more information, that is when you want to have a dream intention. And I'll just give you a hint of what I do is, as you hit the pillow with your head, you say to yourself, I would like to have a dream that gives me, let's say, clarity about a particular situation and also some depth. Clarity and depth. And if you say that to yourself aloud, it registers more deeply. And I just want to make another point here is, intentions are very powerful. And when we need to catch an airplane at 7 o'clock and we need to get up at 5 o'clock, we set the alarm clock, and when do we wake up? Just before 5. That's intention. That's powerful. And we can do that with anything in our lives and cultivate that. So if we say, okay, I'd like to have a dream that gives me clarity about my situation and some depth, that's intention. And so that's what you're talking about. Okay, I need some clarity about the situation. So please continue. Yeah, go on.
Well, I just had one more thing I wanted to say, and that was that sometimes in our past lives we've done things that we need to pay back karma, just to balance. And very often you can balance that karma in your dream and not have to actually experience it in your physical. Not always.
Okay, so make that face once again. That's great. That is great. So you have a deep relationship in terms of past lives, and can connect with that. That's a gift. Yes.
My question, the reason I came, is when I was a very young woman, when I was in my 20s, I was expecting a baby. And about a week before I had the baby, I dreamed it was going to die. And it wasn't a dream, it was a revelation, your baby's going to die. And I went to the doctor and told him, and he said, no, don't worry about that. Well, my baby was born, and he lived 2 days, and he died. And then after that, for about 5 years, I used to have these revelations. They would just come to me through a dream whenever something significant was going to happen in my life. And it seemed like it was a way to prepare me, maybe, but then I just quit having them. And then I didn't dream for years. And I've started dreaming again, but not bad things, just happy things. But why would you have those kind of dreams?
Margie, just right now, what emotion is present?
What emotion? I just almost cried.
So just take a good breath. Take a good breath. Yeah, it is.
50 years ago, 60 years ago.
How powerful this is. How the dream at that point, or the dreams at that point, just had your life in such a presence, and it's still with you. And so at this point, just kindness. So Jolene, I would like to ask you, just put your hand on Margie's back, if it's okay. Just okay. There has been a lot of sorrow and a lot of sadness about that. And dreams, these dreams might come back again and again. And they're just there to, I think, to have compassion about that. On one hand, I see what happened to you in those younger years. In some way, there is a larger consciousness that wanted to come through. And it is a gift, even though it's a sad gift. And our day consciousness fights with us. It says, I don't want to hear about it, I don't want to be with that, and argues, and it's often an act of will to ignore dreams. So what I would suggest with a gift like this, Margie, and it is a gift, to have a different intention and say, I don't only want to experience sorrowful or sad or dramatic or accident recognitions, pre-recognitions, but also the delight of the world, so that it's shifted. We don't have to we can ask for that. We can ask for the beauty, the great love that is also present in the world for those dreams. And we don't need to be always the carrier of bad news. That's how I would. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You shift the intention. You ask, okay, yes, I know this is a gift of pre-recognition, but I do not also always want to be the carrier of bad news, but also the joy and the love of the world. So I would cultivate that. Cultivate that, Margie. And thank you for sharing that. And it is an act of courage just to share that. Yes,
I
please.
am also here because sometimes I have dreams and I wake up and I feel so exhausted. And I don't know what to do with it. I feel like I'm still part in the dream. I don't get anything from it. I don't understand it. But I have this almost like a physical sensation in me of confusion and fog or
I hope that got on camera. We get into the aspect of what so-called function is there to dreams. If we were not to dream, we would go crazy. And so why would we go crazy? And dreams, they have all these different emotions and drama and anxieties and aggression and so on in them. And some of that is really just working things out from our life. And maybe we're not even conscious of it. And so, if this were my dream, not that I would just like this, who wants to be in that state? We all want to be smiling, love, and light. But I think I would say, well, obviously something needs to be worked out, and especially on the emotional, our emotional body, and that can be so totally draining. Let's say you have an anxiety dream, and you wake up and that's totally draining, can be totally draining. So to say to us, okay, something needed to be worked out. We can get really mad when we have a cold, or we have a flu that's going on right now. And you can say, oh, that's just terrible, and what can I do about it? We can take all kinds of medication. But you can also say to ourselves, oh, our immune system needs to be tuned up. And it's a gift. Not that we like it. And so that's the interaction of the day consciousness and wants to do something about it. Say, okay, maybe something needed to be worked out. And today, I'm just going to watch television, or I don't know, do nothing. So that's how I would approach these things. And, maybe somebody can share a fine anxiety dream.
A what?
Anxiety dream. Yeah, please.
I went through a catastrophe. I went through Hurricane Katrina, and was literally, I was living in New Orleans, and I was blown away. And for many years after that, most of my dreams, at least the ones I remembered, were all very traumatic. They were about destruction or abandonment or just being lost, all that kind of stuff. And it got so bad that after a while, I was almost afraid to go to sleep, because even though I was trying to work my way through this trauma that I had experienced, and I was seeing a therapist, and I was getting better, and all that, but I kept having these dreams, and this went on for 5, 6, 7 years maybe. And little by little, they started getting less intense. But they were still there, and maybe not as often, too. And what I didn't understand is why it was almost like reliving the event, and why did I have to keep going over that and over that and over that and over that? And it just got to the point where I tried to push it out of my mind. I tried to not think about these dreams, but I'd always wake up, the first thing I'd feel was awful. I'd wake up in the morning, and then I'd have to work out of that.
You're describing a post-traumatic stress syndrome here, and a pretty intense one for that matter. So that's one, when a post-traumatic stress syndrome has the tendency of relooping as if something gets stuck in our night consciousness, to work this one out. Now, as you describe it, this sort of worked itself out little by little, but how many years did it take you?
5, 6, 7 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
So
But I was also working on it actively in my day consciousness,
So how?
through therapy.
Therapist.
Mhm.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome, and depends, on the severity. Let's say with a rape or a fire, or I had once a client who was in a fire, and the mother died in the fire, and he would just, even as an adult, have aspects of that event and it does get tricky. And I'm not quite exactly sure, there are different ways of working with this. But at this point, I would almost say there's a Tibetan way, a Tibetan Buddhist way of working with some of that, where you actually, you start visualizing the situation. You just sort of externalize it, like, oh, okay, here is this hurricane, and whatever it might be a storm on the face, or whatever it might be. And then ask it, what do you need? How can I feed you? So it could be anything. Could be bicycles, could be food, could be love. Keep asking and do that practice several times a day, just to recognize the enormity of that trauma. And somehow that external, rather than internalizing, the anxieties, it's all over the body, but, just visualize it and then work it like this. So that could be also a way with working with it, but nothing is foolproof, Healers need to do this, need to do that.
Well, they have stopped.
Bah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I have had, in this anger management, there's this one guy, and it took for people 3 months to even, I don't want to be here, I hate this, and I hate you. So there's one guy, and every once in a while I would ask, are you dreaming? And a lot of them, because they're taking drugs or some sort, drugs are not conducive for dream recall or even dreaming. And so he said, yes, I had this 2-part dream. I was chasing this guy who was ripping me off with drugs, and I was running after him, and I was trying with a gun. I'm trying to get him, and he gets into this house, this cabin, and there's no door. There's a door. He runs into the cabin, and there's no window. Nothing is closed. That's part A. Part B. He is the guy who gets pursued. So one on the part A, the aggression, the anger, the violence, all is in there. So part B, he's in the consciousness of the one pursued. So the anxiety, the fear that he runs into the cabin without a window, locks the door, but he has a chainsaw. And he cuts a window into the cabin. At that point, I knew he was ready to talk. The window was open. But you can see, great anxiety, great aggression, great anger, all of that, just boiling in it. So, but it gave you, there's a window, there's an opening. And there was, not a big one, but let's just talk about various forms of dreams. So there's always the big dream. The big dream is something that just is takes you through your entire life. You know, you might have had the dream when you were a child, or last week, or last year, but you remember it because it is so big. And so, you know, historically, we have, you know, the Bible has a lot about dreams. And historically, there is this dream of, you know, 5,000 years ago, the Pharaoh dreams. He's standing at the Nile there, and he's watching the Nile, and there are 7 fat cows coming out of the Nile, and they are grazing, and after a while there are 7 skinny cows coming out of the Nile, and they are, you can see every bone, and they eat the fat ones. And the Pharaoh is so disturbed by this dream, like a big dream, he stops everything in the entire empire. And he says, like an emergency, and he calls for all the seers and all the clairvoyants and astronomers and astrologers and God knows what to help him interpret this dream. And nobody could do it to his satisfaction. So he heard about this Israeli in the jail, and he is a seer. He's a prophet, Joseph. He calls him and he says, you will have 7 years of bountiful harvests and 7 years following of drought and no harvest, and the country could just go starving. And the Pharaoh acts upon it. Now, is this outrageous? So, I mean, there's another a more recent example of a big dream. Gandhi, who was, it was during the time of getting to be independent from Britain, had a dream, and you know, the situation was the different fractions were all bickering with each other. There was violence. There was, you know, the country could not be united. And how do you get independent of, have a movement of independence from a powerful country like Britain? He had the following dream. He dreamt that all these different fractions, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jains, and whoever else, would come together for a large celebration. And he woke up and he said, all right. So he started talking to Nehru, and Nehru said, this is just a dream. But Gandhi insisted, and he wrote to all the leaders of these different fractions and said, let's have a celebration, let's have a big march and celebrating march through the streets. And they did. And that was kind of the turning point of that movement of independence. Now, these are big dreams. And I doubt that in our politics we would have that. However, you know, there are dreams that just kind of stop us in our tracks. And, you know, maybe somebody can tell us a big dream. Okay, Karen?
Because there was a
significant period of my life, and I was too stressed out in the job I had. I was too responsible and blah, blah, blah. And I had a dream, and I woke up from it, and I was terrified. I was in a car. I wasn't in the driver's seat. I was in the back seat, and I was going down a very narrow alley, and I was going at a really fast rate of speed. And then another car was coming at me, and I knew it was the end. And I felt like I experienced death. And when I woke up, I actually thought I had died. And so it was a big event. and from that point on, I knew I had to live my life in a different way.
So Karen, just a moment here. What are you noticing inside, please?
Well, I can.
Just take a moment, just reflect. No, this was a big
Well,
moment.
I can feel like the tension and the tightness, and almost like at that time I was very tense and tight, and my throat was really constricted. And I knew that I was living life the way my father had lived life, kind of driven, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So, it was a pivotal moment.
So it is really good, when you are dreaming, maybe you're remembering the dream, you're writing down the dream in the morning. What body sensations are present? What emotions are present? And that will give you a major clue where to go. So let's say with this, this tension is already relating to the times, at the time and the memory of the father, all the tightness up here in the chest. All those body sensations will tell you a story and can lead you deeper into the message of the dream. So that's really a very important aspect to remember in dream interpretation.
I had what I call a big dream. When I first came to Willits, I was 38, 39. And I dreamed that I had a whole big handful of jewels. And I knew they were magic jewels, that each of these jewels could turn into, I could make something manifest, could make a dream become real. Anything I thought of, one of those jewels, I could make that dream come real. And I suddenly got scared that if I made a dream come real, it might turn into something that I hadn't really intended, and it might be ugly, it might hurt people. I had to be really careful what dream I used the jewel on, and I started looking at them, and they weren't as sharp and beautiful. They're not really that pretty, and I started just wanting to hide them in my pants, and then I thought maybe I'd leave some in the ditch, and then I thought, well, then somebody else might come and take a jewel and turn it into something really bad. So there was this whole anxiety about my jewels, and someone came and took me to a church, and this was the church of the high priestess, and they showed me someone there who was ripped to shreds. And they said, now this is a person who tried to give back their jewels, give them back to the priestess. And I looked up, and there's the priestess raging. And I was like terrified. I can't give the jewels back either. And when I finally sat with the dream, I realized that the jewels were my talents that I had been given when I was born. They're just my talents that I have, and that I need to take care of them and not try to hide them and make use of them. So that was a prophetic dream for me.
So Rosamunde, what you experience right now, telling this?
It's fear turned to kind of excitement.
And how do you feel that in your body?
It's moved from fear, like in my chest, up to making me want to smile and laugh. Maybe it's just nervous because I'm telling people, but I think, well, it's many years later, it's 30 years later, and I'm really glad I listened to the dream, so it makes me
So just take
happy.
a moment, take a couple of deep breaths. You're giving us all a gift. You know, you're opening a window into your soul, really, with these dreams, and it's very personal, and it is private, and to share that, you know, in one way is an act of courage, but it's also a gift. So thank you. And yeah, you know, a dream like this, when we have a big dream, they need to be told. We need to share them with somebody. And they also need to be acted upon. You know, just like, oh, okay, your talents, yes, if it were my dream, your talents, you know, they can be also edgy. They can hurt somebody, your inside. But they can also be a total gift to yourself, to your family, everybody. So, yeah. You know, I want to tell, you know, I had a dream that was a couple of years ago, and I'm going into our kitchen, and there is the telephone, you know, phone on the wall. And I'm picking it up, and there is this silence. And I said, "Is that you, Mom?" And she's gone 30 years. "Is that you?" And there's no answer, but I know it's her. And what overcame me was such a tremendous love that my knees got weak, and I just slumped in the dream. I slumped onto the floor, and there was this silence. And that feeling carried me through several days. And so, I mean, the mind, but I consider that like a total gift from the other side. And also realized that gift of tremendous love that is possibly on the other side. And hopefully we can open ourselves to that. So it's not often that something like this happens, but it happens. And what happens once can happen again to all of you. So the ancestors or whoever can also contact you. Yes.
This would be a wonderful ending. You were talking about different dreams, and you started with there are big dreams. Can you still say what other dreams are?
You know, repeat dreams. She was talking about repeat dreams, where you have them again and again and again, and might wind up in a nightmare. So Repeat dreams are, you know, you have to pay attention. It says, okay, you didn't pay attention to this one, you know, and if you're not paying attention to this one, I'm going to tighten the screws. A little more anxiety, a little more of this or that, or a little more shadow where you think, oh gosh, please. So, you know, after my parents died, I had this repeat dream of funeral, and well, this kind of funeral and that kind of funeral, and I thought, please spare me. And then at one point, I just said to, I think I just have to realize and accept my parents have died and have gone to the other side. And after I became, you know, to a deeper acceptance, the dream stopped. But you can do many things. You can act them out, you can write, you can do art, you can do music. I'm right now thinking of working with this wild guy. He is a Jungian therapist in Mexico, but he also works as a shaman, and I met him at a dream conference. And he works with sound. So you tell your dream, you notice the body sensation, you move, whatever, whether it's an anxiety, with sound, and he helps you with the sound. And sound is a very powerful energy to move, to move energy. You know, singing, but you know, especially when it's a dream. Oh, how do I express this sound of anxiety or joy or whatever it might be? And just, you know, everybody asks, oh, how do I remember? And the dreams are ephemeral. Have a piece of paper, a notebook next to your bed. Seed your dreams with an intention the night before. When you wake up, look on your pad. Oh, okay, and then what? Is there an emotion? Is there a tidbit, just an image? And write that down. Just whatever you have. If it's a feeling, anything, imagery, or if it's an epic, write it down. The subconscious says, paying attention, I'm giving you more. So it's a certain kind of a practice. However, if you get distracted, the radio on, you know, the alarm thing, you know, you start thinking, what am I going to eat? You know, the daily routine is devastating to dreams. So take some time, honor the dreams, because they are the royal road to wellness.